Whether it's a world champion boxer, a basketball player, a track star, a horse, even animals, I find out that this Mark Spitz, for an example, he's a world champion. But what made him the world champion was that he seemed to, at the right time when the pressure's down, at the last few yards, he can get that lead, or he's got enough left to make it. I fought Ken Norton, my last fight. The fight was even up until the last round, but I had something that he didn't have, although I'm much older, and that was the last-minute kick.
What's that last-minute kick? Is that something?
Just the stamina, the strength.
It's more than training, though.
The mental capacity, to realize what's involved and how important it is to make your body do something that's really too tired to do. Your mind makes you do it. Mark Spitz, this Olympic track star was mentioning, he wasn't that much greater than all the people in the world, but sometimes he won by just that much. And the champion is just one who can come out at the last minute and close the show. As I say, the star closes the show. A 14, 15-round fight, and it's even, and usually this champion, you can depend on him to come through the last few seconds and find some energy from somewhere.
Is it discipline?
Not only that, it's mental and physical. His body's in physical shape to do it, plus mentally too. He's got himself in condition where both fellas may be, sometimes the will can outdo the skill. And sometimes a fella's will is stronger than the man who's actually better physically, and the determination and weakens the other man just to see him so determined.
People are afraid of George Foreman. They talk about how hard he hits. The world has been deceived. You listen to me now. I've never told you wrong. The man don't hit hard. He knocked Joe Frazier down 6 times. He got up 6 times. Joe King Roman, his Tokyo, Japan fight, the Puerto Rican champion, knocked him down 3 times. He jumped up 3 times. He knocked Ken Norton down 4 times. He jumped up 4 times. When have you ever saw the man say 7, 8, 9, 10, count his man out? When I hit Sonny Liston the second fight, he stayed out for the count of 10. Zora Foley stayed out for the count of 10. Cleveland Williams stayed out for the count of 10. What few I have knocked out stayed down. Sugar Ray Robinson knocked him out for the count of 30. Joe Louis, Marciana, Jack Dempsey, Jack Johnson, Archie Moore as a child, they knock him out cold. So this man has never knocked nobody out cold. He's a bully. He's slow. He has no skill, no footwork. He's awkward. And I have been giving him a name. I named Floyd Patterson the Rabbit. I named Sonny Liston the Bear. And he shall be known as officially as the Mummy. The Mummy.
And why the Mummy?
Because he fights. When he's fighting, if you ever watch him in the ring, he drags like that after his opponent. And how's a mummy gonna catch me? When you're fighting a mummy, you just keep a step ahead of the mummy. See? Yeah, just move on the mummy. No, mummy, I'm over here. No, mummy, I'm over here. Yeah, no, you're moving too fast. The mummy don't move that fast.
Do you ever get frightened before a fight? Do you ever get nerves before a fight?
I'm nervous, but not frightened. I'm nervous because I have a great insight on, I just don't see the audience. Every camera, I see millions of people. Like the Frazier fight was watched by 100 million people, which is 5 times the population of everybody in the United States. Just a picture arena with 1 million people. I imagine you couldn't see them all. And just think about 100 million and 100 million. And all those people and everything, that makes me nervous. Just the idea of me just being a humble fellow from Kentucky, got lucky in sports, and now here's the house, the fight was piped in a place like Thailand to the government house, and Arabia and the government officials took time off to watch the fight, and just for 2 men boxing, attracting so many people of all races and nationalities. In Hawaii, I understand, they stopped, closed all the factories, and the people, they set televisions on every other street corner. People came out watching the fight on the streets, and every bar in America, every house, even traffic was still during that fight. In Madison Square Garden, 10,000 people couldn't get in, and just over 1 man, and just imagine all them people watching you, that makes me nervous until I get started.
And then no nerves at all?
No. My thinking is so superior, and my knowledge is so positive, and my logic is so wise until it clashes with their mentality, which is down here and I'm up there. So by me being so high, I can see more and see farther than you. And you're looking up at me saying, Ali, don't do it. Don't do it. Ali, please stop, make it hurt. and you're on a job making 60, 70 pounds a week, or whoever this guy is. Never been out of the country, not known in his own neighborhood. Ali, don't do it. But I'm at such a high level until I don't think like you. I'm not like you. Now I say you, I mean the other person.
But you know why they say that. I mean, it's for the best possible reasons, though.
They fear and they are wary. It looks dangerous to them.
That's
but
right.
It's not really that dangerous to me.
No problem. This will be the biggest upset since Sonny Liston. And I think it is befitting that I go out of boxing just like I came in, defeating a big, bad monster that nobody could destroy. A hard punch. I'm the underdog. If he hits me, I'm in trouble, like the Sonny Liston fight. But I came back and I shook the world and I got Liston. Now it's 10 years since Sonny Liston. I'm meeting another big, bad, strong monster, knockout artist that beats everybody. Sonny Liston knocked out Patterson twice, and I was supposed to fall, but he didn't knock me out because he could hit hard, but he couldn't find nothing to hit. George Foreman knocked out Ken Norton, knocked out Joe Frazier. True, I didn't knock him out, but I'm so fast, I'm so hard hit, I'm so scientific. I'm a total different man from Frazier and Norton. Listen, David, when I meet this man, if you think the world was surprised when Nixon resigned, wait till I whip Foreman's behind. I'm telling you, David, I'm down to 215 pounds. Right now, I said here we're in 215. I'm fighting weight already. I usually train 6 weeks for fight. I've trained 4 months for fight. I'm chopping trees. I've done something special. I've wrestled with an alligator. I've tussled with a...
I believe you totally. I believe you completely.
I have tussled with a whale. I done handcuffed lightning, throw thunder in jail. Now, you know I'm bad. Only last week, I murdered a rock, injured a stone, hospitalized a brick. I'm so mean, I make medicine sick.
Porn. You got 1 minute?
1 minute, easy.
Porn goes like this. People say, what's going to happen? You meet Joe Frazier again. Here's how the fight's going to sound on the radio for those of you who can't afford to buy the expensive theater seats. And the fight goes like this. Ding, Ali comes out to meet Frazier, but Frazier starts to retreat. If Frazier goes back an inch farther, he'll wind up in the ringside seat. Ali swings to the left, Ali swings to the right. Look at the kid carry the fight. Frazier keeps backing, but there's not enough room. It's a matter of time. There Ali lowers the boom. Now Ali lands to the right. What a beautiful swing, and the punch lifts Frazier clean out of the ring. Frazier's still rising, but the referee wears a frown, for he can't start counting till Frazier comes down. Now Frazier disappears from view. The crowd is getting frantic, but our radar stations have picked him up. He's somewhere over the Atlantic. Who would have thought when they came to the fight that they would have witnessed the launching of a colored satellite? I don't pay no attention to what they say about me. All I do is just do what I have to do and get paid, and that's it. But I don't really pay no attention to the rules of boxing. I don't pay no attention. I defy all the rules. I've added pages to the book of boxing. I have this game as such a thing now until boxing promoters can no longer afford my shows. I have governments like Iran ready to put up $10 million for me to fight Joe Frazier. I have governments like Cairo, Egypt, wanting to put up $6 million for people like Ron Lyle. I have countries all back throughout Zaire talking to Mobutu. He wants him back again. They'll put up $5 more million for return with Foreman. When we talk about 10 million and 6 million and 4 million, this is unbelievable. And they don't expect to get the money back. They're promoting their countries and their ideals. So I've excelled so in this sport of boxing until Madison Square Garden is too small. Yankee Stadium is too small. The Houston Astrodome, the biggest promoters in the wealthiest Americans and Englishmen you can get for promotions cannot just promote me no more. You understand? So I've not only added pages to boxing, but added new sections to the boxing book.
Everybody stop talking now. Attention. I told you, all of my critics, I told you all that I was the greatest of all time when I beat Sonny Liston. I told you today I'm still the greatest of all time. Never again defeat me. Never again say that I'm going to be defeated. Never again make me the underdog until I'm about 50 years old. Right. Then you might get me. But I didn't dance. I didn't dance for a reason. I wanted to make him lose all his power. I kept telling him he had no punch. He couldn't hit. He's swinging like a sissy. He's missing. Let me see your box. I hadn't started dancing yet. You can't say my legs are gone. You can't say I was tired, because what happened? I didn't dance from the second round on. I stayed on the ropes. When I stay on the ropes, you think I'm doing bad. But I want all boxers to put this in the page of boxing. Staying on the ropes is a beautiful thing with a heavyweight when you make him shoot his best shots and you know he's not hitting you. I would have gave George Foreman 2 rounds of steady punching, because after that he was mine.
I want to say something right here. This might make you all think. Life is not really long. Let's say the average person 30 years old. If you're 30 years old, you are not but about 7 years old. How can I prove it? Add up all the 7, 8, 9 hours you slept for 30 years. Out of 30 years, add up all the nights, last night when you went to bed and woke up this morning, you don't remember a thing. You've been unconscious for about 8 years. If you're 30 years old, you slept about 8 years. Okay. How much traveling have you done in 30 years? From the television station to home, to another country, to another city, to school, to church. You've probably traveled 2 years of your life or spent just getting back and forth to where you're going. So there's 8 years of sleeping, 2 years of traveling. There's 30 years out of your life before you accomplish anything. How long do you sit in school? In America, we stay in school from the 12th grade from the 1st grade to 12th grade. Same here?
Yeah, virtually.
6 hours a day?
Yeah.
6 hours a day for 12 years, break it down, you sat in a classroom for 3 years without leaving. Okay, 2 years of traveling, 8 years of sleeping, 3 years of school. How many movies have you went to? How many wrestling matches? How much entertainment? How many movie theaters, live plays, baseball games? Probably 2 years of entertainment. So by the time a man, you older people know him, bear with us what I'm saying, by the time you have children, by the time you have made a way for your children, by the time you've paid for your home, you're pushing 60 years old. So life is real short.
You know, I'm sure Henry will tell you, any fighter that knows what's happening, you really can't plan a fight when you're meeting a man you've never met before, right? You just have to get your tools ready. Here's a car stops on the highway. They call the AAA or whatever and say, my car's broke down. What it is, the lady, she don't know what's broken. Well, the man comes with all the tools, and he come equipped to handle whatever the problem is. An astronaut goes into space, and he pretends that something happens to the ship before he take off. He gets out and he works on it. He's not looking for something to happen, but it might happen. So I just had everything ready. Now, after the first round, being here with a top professional, a man so great, had so many knockouts, never been defeated, never been even scratched, I didn't know really how good he was. So I had to come in, actually a little nervous, and with everything ready. After one round of dancing, I found out that this would tire me out. So I would have to resort to ropes. I figured that out after the first round. So I said, I'm gonna go to these ropes, and I'm gonna let this man throw everything he can, let him tire himself out. He might look like he's winning, and if he don't hurt me, I'm gonna stay here. But if he should be as great as they say he is, if he hits as hard as they say he hit, when he hits you and breaks your arm, he knocked out Joe Frazier, I couldn't do it, knocked out Ken Norton, he was a big bad giant before the fight, you remember. Now you remember that, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
How bad he was? They don't say that now, but you remember he was a real bad cat the other day, right? Don't forget that. Now, after I found out he didn't have it, I stayed there. But if he had what I thought he had or what they said he had, I'd have kept running, hoping I wouldn't get tired.
Whenever people fail to achieve their goals, 99.9% of the time, and you ask them why, they'll tell you it's because of a lack of resources. That's what all these things are. I didn't have the support, right? I didn't have the money. We didn't have the time. We didn't have this. We didn't have that. There's a resource that people believe is missing. And that resource belief structure then keeps people from ever being able to really lead. Because what leaders do is they find a way to maximize whatever resources they have, as little as they may be, and they don't believe in limited resources. I'll give you an example. Let's take a business example to start with. In 1974, a guy named Sam Walton had built his little company up. He came up with an idea. He started with $20,000 in, I think, 1962, if I remember right. But by 1974, within 12 years, he had 78 stores. And you know how he did it? In the middle of the night, he'd drive across the border and he'd go and study other people's stores. He'd buy everything the cheapest he could in the middle of the night. He'd go to the people's stores. Whatever was working, he figured out. Success leaves clues. He came back and did it in his store. Whatever was working in any store, in any competitor, anywhere he could do it, he did it. So he figured out how to maximize the little resources he had, his 20,000, built 78 stores, and if you read any of the people following him, the company had gone public in that year, they were all saying, this is it. He's maximized his resources. I mean, he only has so much money. There's only so many cities that are going to appeal to this discounting mentality, right? This is it. This is all he can do. And the word on Wall Street was sell. Now, what's interesting is at that time, you look at Sears and Kmart, and they were gargantuan companies, weren't they? 20, 30, 40, 50 times, 100 times his size or more, probably. And at that time, they were the leaders, and they knew what's going to happen. But did things change, yes or no? Did he suddenly get mass amounts of capital? No. Here's what they didn't understand. Sam Walton now, or the Walton organization, Walmart, is the most successful retailing operation on earth. And when you talk about Bill Gates being the richest man in the world, that's only true because Sam's fortune is divided up amongst a bunch of different family members. You put them together, they dwarf Bill Gates. Sam Walton did this. How did he do it? What people underestimated is that this guy could go to 4,400 stores, do 250 billion. Where's Kmart today? And they've been shrinking. All of them have been shrinking. And he's the dominant force on earth. Here's the thing he understood. Resources are interesting, but the ultimate resources are the feelings of emotion that make you resourceful. Think of it this way. Resourcefulness is the ultimate resource. What do I mean? What are the emotions that make all this possible? What's the fuel that takes an idea from being in your head where you intellectually know what to do? How many have had an idea, for example, was a great idea, you're excited about it, and then you didn't do anything. One day, there you saw it on the shelf, you saw it somewhere, someone stole your idea. How many have had this happen? Say I. The only difference between you and that person was not that they had more resources, they were more resourceful.
When people are beset with a catastrophe, like let's say the death of their father, that they are prone to use that as an excuse for not going about the business that they should be going about. Because they can say to themselves, well, I would accept. And accept, there's always good reasons. I mean, believe me, there's always good reasons for not doing what you should. That's for sure. The reasons pile up day after day to not do what you should, especially because you're aiming at things in the future. You can put them off indefinitely, right? Because of the demands of the day. Like there's no excuse whatsoever for not getting at what it is that you should be doing. It's absolutely reprehensible to justify your inaction with a catastrophe that extracts mercy from other people, right? There's a tricky game that's going, well, of course I can't do that. Look at the terrible thing that's just happened to me. It's, yeah, okay, I understand. You're absolved of any necessity to move forward because of your current catastrophe. It's like, well, actually you're not. And it's rather rude of you to use it as an excuse. And it's certainly counterproductive.
The bravery and discipline to say no to your many good opportunities. What destroys a great company is actually opportunity bloating. Too many good opportunities. So literally, you diffuse your team's bandwidth and you get distracted. And you see with so many companies right now, they sort of found their sweet pocket and they were absolutely winning in their marketplace. And they decided to go, we've got this app that is really changing the game and owning the marketplace. Let's get into food delivery. Let's get into this. Let's get into that. It happened to General Electric as well. And you probably know they decided at one point, if we can't be one or two in any market, we're going to get out of that market. That's the key point I'm trying to make. Know your mighty mission, know your monomaniacal focus, and then have the discipline to say no to everything else so you can lock and load on your finest opportunity to completely change the game.
I was 25 or so. I probably weighed about 138 pounds. I smoked like a pack of cigarettes a day. I drank tremendous amount of alcohol. I was from northern Alberta, this rough little town up in northern Alberta called Fairview, and there were long winters there, and my friends were heavy drinkers, and most of them dropped out of school by the time they were 15 or 16, went off to work on the oil rigs, and it was a rough town, and we drank a lot. I started when I was 14, and and so I had a lot of bad habits, let's say, and things that were, and I wasn't in great shape physically, and I was also still intellectually obsessed by, as I am now, and so that would have been in 85. But I decided around then, about 85, 84, something like that, maybe a little earlier, that I was really going to try to get my act together, and so I started doing that. First of all, I quit smoking. Well, that took a long time because I eventually had to quit drinking too in order to quit smoking, and I started working out, started playing sports, which I'd never done. I had a fine time when I was a kid, but I needed really to get disciplined, and I had to do it because I was working on these hard problems that I've been discussing with all of you, and I've been working on them really, obsessively since I was probably about 18, maybe even earlier than that. And got to the point around 25 when I was in graduate school trying to get my PhD, doing all my research. Like, I published 15 papers by the time I graduated with my PhD, which was I think by a fairly large measure the most papers that any graduate student at that time had ever published at McGill. I think that's right. Might have been twice as many, or maybe twice as many, maybe even 3 times as many. And at the same time I wrote Maps of Meaning, which was a terribly difficult thing to do, because I was writing about 3 hours a day doing that, and I couldn't do all that and continue with my misbehavior, my sort of, what would you say, my hedonistic, my massive hedonistic consumption of alcohol and all of that. I just couldn't keep it up, and also work seriously on the issues that were at hand. So, I had to stop. That's a sacrifice. I had to stop.
I'm the kind of person that believes you should always make decisions with your heart and soul. You can use your brain for math. You can use your brain to look at the fine print in a contract. But when it comes to the actual feel of the decision, you always want to go inward and check it against your heart and soul. How do you do that? Here's the simple test. Does the decision that you're about to make expand you, expand your future, or expand the possibilities of your life? If the answer is yes, then the decision is yes, no matter how terrifying it is. If you conversely look at the choice that you have to make, and the decision will shrink you, will silence you, will inhibit you in some way, then the answer is no. No matter how easy the decision is, no matter how safe the decision is, the answer is no. Now, one of the things I want to point out, that when you start to use this, does it expand or does it shrink me? Does it open possibilities or does it keep things closed? Does it raise my voice or does it silence me, right? Is that there's always a short-term and a long-term impact to the decision. The short-term impact to making an expansive decision, a decision that's based in your heart and your soul, sometimes it's terrifying, because sometimes it means moving, or it means changing a job, or changing a relationship, or having a difficult conversation, or starting something new. And those sorts of things are always uncomfortable. So brace for impact, put the force fields up, but make the decision anyway. Because the long-term impact of making a decision from your heart and soul, that is where the best life comes from. Because you're living for what's true for you.
You're actually tougher than you think. You never knew that. And maybe you didn't want to take on the responsibility because, people play a role in their own demise, so to speak. When you had opportunity to go out and explore or withdraw because you were afraid, you chose to withdraw because you were afraid. So it's not only that you were overprotected often, it's that you were willing to take advantage of the fact that you were overprotected and run back there whenever you had the opportunity. So maybe you're a kid in the playground, right, and you're having some trouble with other kids, and in the back of your mind, I should deal with this myself, but you go and tell your mom and get her to intervene. And you know that that's not right. You know that you're breaking the social contract, but it's easier, and so that's what you do. You run off to an authority figure and hide behind the Great Father, right, roughly speaking. Well, the problem with that is you don't learn how to do it yourself. So then you have to relearn it painfully when you're 40. So then you take people out, and you say, well, what are you afraid of? Rank it from 1 to 10. So 10 is, make a list of 10 things you're afraid of. The thing you're least afraid of we'll call number 10. So we'll start with that. Okay, well, I'm afraid of elevators. Okay, well, let's look at a picture of an elevator. Let's have you imagine being in an elevator. Let's go out to an elevator and let you watch the terrible jaws of death open, because that's how you're responding to it symbolically, right? And you're going to do that at the closest proximity you can manage. You find out, you go do that, it works. You're nervous as hell, especially from an anticipatory perspective. Shaking. You go out, you stop, you watch it happen, and you actually calm down. You do that 10 times and it no longer bothers you. Well, what you've learned that you didn't die, but more importantly than that, you've learned that you could withstand the threat of death. That's what you've learned. And then you move a little closer, and then you move a little closer, and then you move a little closer, and finally you're back in what's no longer the elevator from a symbolic perspective. It's a tomb, right? It's a place of enclosure and isolation. And you learn, turns out I can withstand that. And then you're much more together, much more confident. And that's often one of the things that often happens in situations like that. I've seen this multiple times, is that if you run someone through an exposure training process like that and toughen them up, they'll often start standing up to people around them in a way they never did before.
Michael Gerber, the guy that wrote the E-Myth, talks about why so many businesses, young businesses, fail. And one of the things he says is most people are not really entrepreneurs, but they think that's what they should be. They think that's the sexy thing, that's the most attractive thing, that's the best answer. And what I say to you is, you gotta separate the vehicle from the outcome. What is it that's gonna truly fulfill you? What is it that's gonna give you that extraordinary life? What's gonna make things magnificent on your terms, not somebody else's terms, not your father, your mother, your background? What is that really? Separate the vehicle, because there's many ways to get to that vehicle. But I'm saying, sometimes you gotta reevaluate what's gonna really make you fulfilled. What is your gift? Are you an artist? Are you the talent that can produce something no one else produces as a skill or a product or a service or some impact? Are you incredibly good at management? You really know how to manage or lead people? Are you an extraordinary entrepreneur that can take that gigantic gut load of risk and can create the vision and attract the talent that you need and the managers and leaders? You may have all three abilities, but which one really fulfills you the most is going to be the critical question. Because we tend to want to do them all, especially in a room like this, because you're all overachievers, right? Me too. And you say, well, I can do all these. Yes, you can, but what will it do to your quality of life? See, again, the secret's going to be this. What is an extraordinary life on your terms today?
I remember being in Soho, New York, and I walked into one of the stores and I bought a coat. And I was leaving on an airplane for home later that day, and I asked the person who was taking care of me, I said, is it possible, and that's a great respectful way to ask for something, is it possible to get this coat hemmed and adjusted a little bit for me? And I said, the thing is that I'm leaving later today. And he looked at me, and I've never forgotten it, because we all have these people in our lives who say one thing or show up in a certain way, and they stay with us for the rest of our lives. And he said to me these words. He said, I'd love to do that for you. I'd love to do that for you. And again, the whole brain tattoo I'm trying to deconstruct here is make your I can larger than your IQ. I remember being in Prague, and I asked someone on the other, again, I spent a lot of time in hotels, and I said, is it possible to do this? And here was the reply on the other end of the phone. I think it was someone from the front desk, or maybe it was room service. And I try to eat as clean as possible. So probably it was a request, could I have olive oil and fresh lemon or lemon as the salad dressing? And here's the reply. Just to really lovingly and respectfully and hopefully fluently and elegantly bring this leadership insight home to you. I said, is this possible? And his reply was, anything is possible. So it's really easy to get seduced and stuck into a mindset of can't. Someone says, let's start a new business. Someone says, here's a great poetic project that if we release it to the world will help us own our marketplace. And it sounds very obvious again, but ask yourself this. Is your default reply, a symptom of a mindset of can't, or do you have a mentality of possibility? When someone says, here, read this book, do you shift into can't or can? When someone says, hey, you know what? I'm amped to run a marathon. Do you go, I can't? Is that your default setting in your neurobiological hardwiring? Or do you go, absolutely, or I'd love to do this? You know, it's really, really important, and that is one of the core distinctions of leadership, isn't it?
Success and failure are not giant events. They don't just show up. You don't just suddenly become successful or suddenly have this cataclysmic event that makes you fail. It may look that way, but failure comes from all the little things. It's failure to make the call. It's failure to check the books. It's failure to say, I'm sorry. It's failure to push yourself to do things physically that you don't want to do. And all those little failures day after day come together until one day some cataclysmic event happens and you blame that. That event happened because you missed all the little stuff. Do you agree with me? And success, by the way, is not some overnight event. It's all these little things. Success is having a vision. Success is making it compelling. Success is really seeing it and feeling it every day with strong enough reasons. Success is feeling the sense that I'm here to grow and I'm here to give something to the world more than just myself. All the little stuff. That's where success comes from. In business, it comes from delivering more than anybody could imagine. All those little things add up. People go, wow, that's who I want to do business with.
Every great hero was broken. Now, if you were to look at Nelson Mandela, he suffered more than most people. If you were to look at Mother Teresa, she went through incredible adversity over the course of her journey. If you were to study Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Rosa Parks, Shakespeare and Tolstoy. If you look at any great artist, a Picasso, a Jean-Michel Basquiat, if you look at the great world builders, they all suffered. Let me put it to you this way with great love and respect. They all outsuffered the majority. And what I'm suggesting to you is pain can be transformed into power with the intention to transform pain into power. You see, what most people do is, this is why most good people lose. They stumble and they fall and they become heartbroken or disappointed by life's challenges that happens to every single one of us. I mean, just to be very authentic, as I always want to be in these Mastery Sessions episodes, I've gone through a lot of hardship in my life. When I was, going through school, very few people believed in me, and I was dismissed and called very, very average. And the principal at the school I was at said, you're not even going to get into university. And you might know my backstory on The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari, but that was a self-published book, and I was at the American Booksellers Conference in Chicago with a cover of one of my books around my neck, shaking hands with all the agents that were coming up the escalator. And when I was a self-published author, I used to go into bookstores and say, would you take 3 copies of my book? I'll sign them. Could you put it on the shelf? And I was treated rudely, and I was laughed at, and I was on radio shows and I was ridiculed. And then I've gone through a lot of personal pain in my own life. And I've been on the top of the mountain of victory, and I must tell you, I have walked the lonely path in the darkness, in the valley of darkness. But Rumi, the great philosopher, said it so beautifully. He said, allow your heart to be broken over and over and over until it opens. And what I'm suggesting to you is really to dial into this insight. All great heroes have been broken. But rather than blaming 27 years in imprisonment in the case of Nelson Mandela, rather than blaming his naysayers and his detractors in the case of Mahatma Gandhi, rather than saying life is hard, why isn't greatness easy in the case of a Mother Teresa or Martin Luther King Jr., rather than saying, why did this happen to me in the case of Rosa Parks, who refused to give up her seat to someone on a bus because she was being treated like a second-class citizen because of the color of her skin. These great ones all had one thing in common. They leveraged their pain into power. They turned their tragedies into victories.
If you concentrate solely on your career, you can get a long way in your career. And I would say that that's a strategy that a minority of men preferentially do. That's all they do. They work like 70, 80 hours a week. They go flat out on their career. They're staking everything on the small probability of exceptional status in a narrow domain. But it's hard on them. They don't have a life. It's very difficult for them to have a family. They don't know how to take any leisure activity. Like, they get very one-dimensional. Now, it may be that unidimensionality is the price you have to pay to be exceptional at one thing, right? Because if you're going to be something like a genius-level mathematician, and you want to do that or a scientist, say, it's like, you're in your lab all the time, you're working 70 hours a week or 80 hours a week, you're smart, you're dedicated, you're unidimensional, and that's how you get to beat all the other people who are doing that. It's the only way. But the problem is you don't get a life. Now, if you love being a scientist and you have that kind of focus of mind, well, first of all, you're a rare person, and second, you're going to pay for it. But fine, more power to you. But it's a risky business to do that. You sacrifice a lot for it. You know, and I would say most often, if you're speaking about having a healthy life, that isn't what you do. You spread yourself out more. So, you know, you have a family, you have some things that you do outside of work that are meaningful to you and useful. You have a network of friends. Well, those 3 things alone, or 4 things alone, are plenty to keep you well oriented. And then if one of those things collapses, you know, everything doesn't go. Now, the price you pay for that is the more you strive to optimize that balance, the less likely you are to be fantastically successful at any single one of them. But you might have a very, you know, if you consider your life as a whole, that might be a winning strategy.
Leverage is critical. You know how I get so much done? Because I don't just get it done. I know the outcome, I know the purpose, and I look for leverage. Leverage is different than delegation. What's the problem with delegation? Delegation is you have all that needs to be done, so you give it to someone else, and you tell them what needs to be done, and when they don't do it, you're pissed off. Leverage says, I can move the biggest boulder in the world with a little bit of effort if I get something I can do it with, and I'm still part of it. So leverage is, if I'm going to leverage something here with Tom, I'm going to make sure Tom understands the what? The outcome. I want to make sure Tom understands the purpose, the why, and the action. But I might say to Tom, if you can get this done without this action or better action, go for it, baby. And I want to talk to you on this date, and we got to promise him we're going to check in before it's needed. So there's no surprises. And if you're having problems, Tom, come back to me because we're partners on this. That I call leverage. And you know what I do when I have no time? There is time. I just got to leverage it. You know, say I have no one to leverage it to. You know, Shane over here, right? I got all the stuff he wants to do, can't leverage it. But Shane's answer was, hire somebody, then he thinks about what it's going to take and goes, $125,000, can't do that now. He's getting caught up in one way to get the outcome. Leverage. He goes through his list and goes, what if I got someone to do 20% of this stuff? I could spend 20 grand to get that much freedom. I could pay for it times 10. And if I'm really productive, my productivity should enhance the world, not only my clients and customers, but it should provide jobs for other people. And if there's anything you hate to do, it's because you're either ineffective at it or you don't think it's very important, but it is urgent. So you need to hire somebody for those things. And ideally, somebody who loves that job. You're never going to grow when your time is eaten up for activities that aren't that important. Activity without high levels of purpose is the drain of your fortune. Do it now. If you can't get it all now, do a part of it now. Leverage is power.
It was the night before we were putting drywall in our house. We were redoing a house, and he had put in all the plastic piping, you know, and I was going to test the joints. They're supposed to be glued together with this pipe glue, right? And I told him I had to test the joints, and he said, well, you don't have to test my joints, they never leak. And I thought, yeah, that's okay. How about if I test them? So I went up on the 3rd floor and filled the pipes with water, capping them in the basement like you're supposed to. And like half an hour later, I had 2 inches of water in the basement. There were 30 leaking joints. And that was the night before the drywallers were supposed to show up. So he wasn't particularly competent. That's the point of that story. But even more so, he had put a bunch of the plastic pipe outside where the drywall would be, so it would have been sticking through the wall. So I spent a frenetic night, you know, sawing through plastic pipe and re-gluing joints so that my Well, so that the dry rollers could come in. What's the point? If you're going to be a plumber, man, be a good plumber. Because otherwise all you do is go out there and cause trouble. We don't need people to cause more trouble. We need people to solve problems. You know, and so you can be a tradesman, and you can make a lot of money as a tradesperson. It's a bloody, reliable, honorable, forthright, productive way of making a living. And there is a hell of a lot of difference between a working man who knows what he's doing and one who doesn't, both in terms of skill and ethics, right? And you work with someone who knows what they're doing, it's a bloody pleasure. They tell you what they're going to do, they tell you how much it will cost, they go and do it, it works, and you pay them. Perfect. Everyone's happy. And that's what happens when you have genuine hierarchies of competence. And so you listen to these panderers of egalitarianism and equity, and they fail to recognize completely that there are differences in rank between people. It's not such a terrible thing, man. Maybe you wouldn't be a great lawyer. Like, it's certainly possible. Most people aren't. But that doesn't mean there isn't something you could be great at. There's lots of hierarchies to attempt to climb, and if you fail in one, go try in another. But the point is, you're still trying to aim for the top. And what the hell are you going to do if you don't try to aim for the top? You know, flap about uselessly and whine about your life? It's not helpful. It'll just make you miserable. You're not reliable to anyone. You can't help out in a crisis. It's like, so you tell young people, and this is another message for conservatives, like, I don't care what you're going to do, but go out there and make something of yourself, for God's sake. Be an honest person and work and get to the top of whatever it is that you want to get to the top of. You know, and stand up for yourself like a respectable human being, and be a bit of a light on the world instead of a blight. You know, and you can tell young people that, and they haven't been told that by anyone now. And so the young men are so hungry for that it's painful to watch. They're so relieved when someone finally comes up and says, hey, you know, you get your act together a bit, discipline yourself, see if you can learn to tell the truth, concentrate on something for a year or two, you could be a bloody world beater. They think, really? That's possible? Wow, that would be interesting. That might make life worth living. It's like, yeah, it might. So why don't you go do it? That's what the damn universities were supposed to be teaching people, and they've forgotten that. I went to Harvard a month and a half. I used to teach there, and I talked to a bunch of students, you know, and I told them, it's not easy to get into Harvard, you know. Like, you're a valedictorian if you're at Harvard. And not only are you a valedictorian, you're way better than most people at least 2 other things, or you don't get in. And so, like, it's, I don't know what the acceptance rate is, like 5%, and believe me, not everybody applies, so it's a very selective school. And so why am I saying that? It's like, these are high quality kids. So I told them what I just told you. It's like, here you are at Harvard. It's like, get yourself educated, man. Read some books, learn to talk, learn to think, make yourself into something. Get the hell out there and make the world that put you here happy that you were put there in that great institution. You know, and they came up to me afterwards and said, God, I wish someone would have told us that when we were in our first year. It's like, Jesus, why didn't someone tell them that? For God's sake, it's supposed to be the greatest university in the world. Is it so difficult to figure that out?
That's what I've created for my life, and anyone I know succeeded. I'm a 17-year-old kid from Azusa, California, with no real education other than self-education, with no background, with parents that did their best, all of them, with no money, but I did one thing. I love people, and I had an enormous demand I made upon myself, and I sculpted my mind and my emotions to get me to do whatever it would take to achieve and to contribute. But to do that, I did it by using my body and changing my focus. I did it by putting myself in a peak physiology and using what I call incantations. Can you train yourself to believe something? Yes or no? Absolutely. How many of you ever made the fatal mistake of going to Disneyland or Disney World, and while you're there made the fatal mistake of going to a ride called It's a Small World After All? What happens for about a week after you're out of that damn place? You're still singing this thing in your head in 24 languages, right? Well, let me tell you something. How many of you have things when you want to go achieve them and this part of your voice goes, oh, it's not going to happen, or forget it? How many got a voice that sometimes interrupts that good pattern? Say, I. And what you want to do is train a new one. So starting when I was 17, I started doing incantations, not affirmations. Affirmation, you go, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy, I'm happy. What's the problem? You haven't changed your what? Your what? physiology. If you don't change your physiology, you won't get anything. So an incantation is not only you speak it, but you embody what you're saying with all the intensity you can. And you do it with enough repetitions that it sticks in your head. Like It's a Small World, now the conversation in your head is always the same and it gives you what you want. So you use your body and your voice. So 17 years ago, I started doing things. I was working for Jim Rohn, this speaker, and I was 17 years old. I had long hair, minestrone soup, acne on my face. And I was trying to call on Bear Stearns type of people and convince them why they should go to this man's seminar and be more successful. I was driving a 1968 Volkswagen that I had earned at $40 a week as a janitor. The only way I did it was park far from the building and then go in, and I love people and I believe, but I put myself in state, and I was able to influence people that were far more successful than I was at the time. I would do something that I still do backstage and have done for 23 years because I don't hope I'm going to be in a good state, I demand it. So I do an incantation using my whole body. I'd say, I now command my subconscious mind to direct me in helping as many people as possible alive today to better their lives by giving me the strength, the emotion, the persuasion, the humor, the brevity, whatever it takes to show these people and get these people to change their lives now. And I would do that literally driving in my Volkswagen to a meeting in LA on the freeway for 40 minutes. People are looking at me, I'm screaming at the top of my lungs. They're going, I know he's a serial killer, I know he is. But by the time I entered that room, when two people meet, if there's rapport, the person who's most certain will always influence the other person. And I was totally certain, and they were trying to get revved up to certainty. Do you agree with this, yes or no? I do another one because I was poor. I changed my mindset. I kept doing things, but I never got beyond it. I'd say God's wealth is circulating in my life. His wealth flows to me in avalanches of abundance. All my needs, desires, and goals are met instantaneously by infinite intelligence, for I'm one with God and God is everything. And I would imagine the abundance of my life, and I would feel so grateful. And a year later, I went from making $38,000 a year to making $1 million a year in 1 year.
What did Beckett say? I can't go on. I'll go on. So even if I don't burn in your hearts and minds long after this speech is over, even if I don't inspire you to reach for the stars and beyond, even if I am erased from your memory after one glass of wine tonight, where am I going with this? I can't go on. I'll go on. You know, I won't speak of my time here like some old fisherman. You have already had your time here. You have your own story to tell. But I have to say, for me, it did start here, in Vermont, on a very rainy night. It was 1987, and I was a prospective student. The rain was coming down so hard, it was impossible to see that I was meeting the person who would later become my greatest friend and collaborator. A freshman who would, 17 years later, introduce me to the woman that became my wife. It was late at night on the road right there near Booth House, and despite the dark night and the heavy rain, this place was so alive. The lights pulsed from each of the dorms. Now, I was a kid from New Jersey who went to an all-boys Catholic high school. I was 4 foot something. I mumbled when I spoke. There are not shinier, more important people out there. Your fellow students, your friends, sitting around you are as good as it gets. 22 years after my own graduation, I have worked with my rainy night friend and fellow graduate, Sherm, on countless productions he has written, in all stages of development from living rooms to off-Broadway. Brooks, Ian, Justin, Brett, John, Matthew, Jim, Sean, Hyla, Nikki, and the Bee are all classmates I shared my time with here and still work with, and am lucky to call my friends. We are very spoiled here. People always say to me, for such a small school, it seems like there are so many of you. I find that really interesting. And I kind of think that's perfect. We can't help it. We burn very brightly. Please don't ever stop. Okay. Graduates, now when I sat where you are, sitting right now, I had so many dreams of where I wanted to go, who I wanted to be, and what I wanted to do. Theater companies I wanted to start with classmates, movies I wanted to be in, directors I wanted to work with, stories I needed to tell. It might take a little time, I thought, but it would happen. When I sat there, 22 years ago, what I didn't want to think about is where I would be tomorrow. What I would have to start to do tomorrow. And I graduated in 1991, a great year, a time of resurgence for independent films in this country, a time of relatively affordable rents in New York City. See, I assumed that I could make a living writing my plays. Acting way off Broadway. And hopefully, one day, join the actors I loved and respected in those independent films. TV? Oh, what? No. What, are you kidding me? No, didn't even consider that. I had much more class than that. Much more self-respect than that. Like soap operas and shit. What I didn't have was cash, a bank account, a credit card, or an apartment. I just had debt. A big, hungry, growing larger every moment debt. So as you will tomorrow, I had to leave beautiful Vermont. I packed the life that I knew with socks and a toothbrush into my backpack, and I slept on couch after couch after couch after couch at friends' apartments in New York until I wore out their rent-paying roommates' welcome. I didn't want a day job. I was an actor. I was a writer. I was a Bennington graduate. I had to get a day job. I dusted pianos at a piano store on Ludlow Street for 5 months. I worked on the property of a Shakespeare scholar for a year, pulling weeds and removing bees' nests. I went on unemployment once, but not for long. I couldn't handle the guilt. Eventually, I was able to pay rent for a spot on the floor of an apartment on the Lower East Side, but my roommate had a breakdown and disappeared. He later resurfaced in a religious cult. I'm making this sound romantic. It really wasn't. I helped hang paintings at galleries, paintings that inspire you to think, I could do that. And then, finally, after 2 years of job and couch surfing, I got a job in application processing as a data enterer at a place called Professional Examination Services. And I stayed for 6 years. 6 years. Longer than my time at Bennington. From the age of 23 to 29, well, they loved me there. I was funny. I wore black, no cape, no tights. I smoked in the loading docks with the guys from the mailroom, and we shared how hungover we all were. I called in sick almost every Friday because I was out late the night before. I hated that job, and I clung to that job. Because of that job, I could afford my own place. My rent was $400 a month. My dream of running a theater company with my friend and fellow Bennington graduate Ian Bell had died. I won't go into those details, but neither one of us had any business sense, and the theater we lived in, it had no heat or hot water. We didn't smell very good, but we had our youth. The youth gets old very quickly. You'll see. So Ian moved out to Seattle, and I moved up the street to my loft. And I still didn't have heat. In 1993, industrial loft meant not legal to live there. I don't want this to sound cool, and I feel like it's sounding cool. Ad lib. But I did have hot water. Hot water in my bathroom, which a friend of mine using said bathroom once shouted, "It smells exactly like a summer camp in here." It was true. For some reason, in the middle of Brooklyn, there was earth in my shower. Actual earth. And then, oh look, mushrooms growing from the earth. But I was safe though. The Ideal Fire Control Company was right across the street where they make all the chemicals that put out chemical fires. I did not fear a chemical fire. I would be okay. And all those chemicals in the air were okay too, because up the street we had the spice factory. They made spices. And that just covered everything up in a nice cumin scent. I had a rat, but that was okay because I got a cat. His name was Brian, no relation. My grandmother had given me a pink pull-out couch. I had only the one window. I myself could not look out the window. It was quite high. So I had no heat, no girlfriend. What, are you kidding me? No acting agent. I stayed for 10 years. No, don't pity me. There's a happy ending. When I was 29, I told myself, the next acting job I get, no matter what it pays, I will, from now on, for better or worse, be a working actor. And now I didn't have either the internet or a cell phone or a job. But something good happened. I got a low-paying theater job in a play called Imperfect Love, which led to a film called 13 Moons with the same writer, which led to other roles, which led to other roles. And I've worked as an actor ever since. But I didn't know that would happen. At 29, walking away from data processing, I was terrified. 10 years in a place without heat, 6 years at a job I felt stuck in. Maybe I was afraid of change. Are you? My parents didn't have much money, but they struggled to send me to the best schools. And one of the most important things they did for me, and graduates, maybe you don't want to hear this, is that once I graduated, I was on my own. Financially, it was my turn. But this made me very hungry, literally. I couldn't be lazy. Now I'm totally lazy, but back then, I couldn't be. And so at 29, and at very long last, I was in the company of the actors and writers and directors I'd sought out that first year, that first day after school. I am by their sides. Raise the rest of your life to meet you. The moments that define you have already happened, and they will already happen again. And it passes so quickly. So please bring each other along with you. Everyone you need is in this room. These are the shiny, more important people. You just get a bit derailed. But soon something starts to happen. Trust me. A rhythm sets in. Just like it did after your first few days here. Just try not to wait until, like me, you're 29 before you find it. And if you are, that's fine too. Some of us never find it. But you will. I promise you. You are already here. That's such an enormous step all its own. You'll find your rhythm or continue the one you have already found. Don't wait until they tell you you are ready. Get in there. Sing. The world might say you are not allowed to yet. I waited a long time out in the world before I gave myself permission to fail. Please, don't even bother asking. Don't bother telling the world you are ready. Show it. Do it. What did Beckett say? Ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail again, fail better. Bennington class of 2012. The world is yours. Treat everyone kindly and light up the night. Thank you so much for having me here.